Welcome to the 10,000 Questions Podcast, a podcast for students where we answer your hardest questions about God, faith, and life. Hosted by Val O'Brien, the director of the 10,000 Questions Project and personal friend and general fan of young people, listen to hear conversations that are full of genuine curiosity, intellectual honesty, and a sincere desire to know what is true and make sense of the world. Everyone has questions. What are yours?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 10,000 Questions Podcast. We are so glad to have you with us. Today, we have an interview episode for you that I think you're really going to enjoy. Maybe enjoy is going to be the wrong word, but I think it's going to be really helpful for you. I think it's going to be really, really helpful and really insightful. It's a hard topic that we're talking about today. We're talking about addiction and we're talking about living with somebody who has addiction. So I hope it's really insightful. I was actually thinking, I know that this is going to be a little bit of a heavier interview, which is funny for me to say because it's an interview with one of my closest friends who is one of the funniest people I know.
Wow. High praise.
I know it is high praise and it's true. And if you think Sean is funny, you should meet him and his wife together. They're like, oh my goodness. It's a crazy and wild time. It's a wild time when Kelly and Sean are in the same place. But I don't know. Maybe that's not going to fully come out today because we have a serious topic to talk about.
Yeah. It's hard to make jokes about addiction, right? They just don't land well.
They don't land great. But I am so happy to have my friend Sean Mabee. Sean on the podcast with us today. So thanks so much for joining us, Sean.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Yes. We were just talking that Sean and I, we worked together for 4 or 5 years, did youth ministry together for 4 years. And 4 years in the type of ministry that we were doing with students feels like 20 years.
Yeah, it's a lifetime.
We did a whole lifetime of work. We've seen some stuff together. Sean and I have seen some stuff. And Sean, actually, we kind of just put this together again. But Sean and Kelly got married the week before I started at the church. So our friendship, the three of us, our friendship is your marriage years old minus 1 week.
12 years, yeah.
12 years minus 1. And when we met, you didn't have any kids. Now you have 4 kids. Now you're a pastor, all this kind of stuff. So it's just been really fun to be friends with Sean. And we could bore you guys. It would be like being at like a reunion of friends that you like didn't want to be at if we started telling funny stories of stuff that we've done over the years. But there's been a lot of life.
Good youth ministry stories.
I know. We've lived a lot of life and friendship in the last 12 years. So, but today, like I said, kind of at the beginning of the episode, we're going to talk about something pretty serious, and that is living with addiction. Living with somebody who has addiction in your home, family member, that type of thing. And that is a part of Sean's story. And it's interesting because even Sean and I, for as good of friends as we have been through the years, we've talked about it like in little pieces. I've known that about your story, and it's come out in different ways. But I'm just excited to be able to like sit down with you, Sean, and almost like have the whole conversation in one piece. Yeah, for you get to tell the story of that experience that you had as a teenager and as a young adult, and then just how that's affected you as you've moved into adulthood. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You probably haven't heard all of it straight through. Like even some of what we're going to talk about today will be new for you, it'll be cool.
Yeah, which is cool. I was going to say, I think about that sometimes. This is just an aside, but I think about that sometimes even in terms of friendship, even in terms of like people you know well, where sometimes even they say like a friend will bring something up and you like don't know to necessarily like chase it or that it's going to be that important later on or what a significant part of their story that is. And just like a cool thing about like being friends with someone for the long haul and that like pieces of their story and everything kind of start to come together. So
yeah,
I'm excited to learn things that I don't know just about you today, Sean. But I want to start at the beginning. I want to start at the beginning of the story. Tell us about your home growing up. Tell us about your parents. Tell us about your sister. Just give us a little snapshot into the Mabee family.
Yeah.
You were growing up.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's not an exciting upbringing. I think I had a pretty typical family, typical background. My parents are great. I think I had great parents, both really present. Both my parents really started following Jesus when I was really young, like right after I was born. And so a lot of my childhood was, again, them both being present. They're still married, them raising us going to church, and they were really trying to follow Jesus. So that was a huge part of their life when I was younger. And then I have just one sibling. Some of the background there, this could be a whole nother podcast. But my dad had cancer when he was about 25, and so they stopped after having 2 kids because they were worried it was going to come back. And so it was just me and my sister. She's 3 years older than me. Yeah, and for the most part, yeah, just pretty normal, typical suburban upbringing.
Yeah. And when did your sister, so your sister is the one who is the addict in your home. When did she, just like according to like your memory of it, when did your sister start using and acting out, and just like when did that start, and how did that start to affect like the vibe of your home? How did that change things that was going on?
The vibe.
Yeah, because it certainly did.
Well, and we've talked about this too. It's a funny thing about memory, even thinking back, man, 20 years ago, what was it like? And maybe you guys, if you're in a similar situation, you have a similar coping mechanism. But I think some of the ways that God protected me, I was able to almost shut off some of what happened and the memories that I had. It's actually hard for me to remember some of those details. Like I've got to be pretty intentional about it. But so it's been an interesting process, even thinking through some of that stuff for this podcast. But I think for me, like my recollection of it as a middle schooler, you remember my sister's 3 years older than me. I think for her, as she got older, my sister started to just get more rebellious in general. And like I said, I think I have great parents, but every parent could have done something different. My parents would say the same thing of, man, hindsight 2020, I do things differently. Me and my sister, as she got older, I think really started butting heads with my dad. I would attribute that to them being pretty similar personality wise, and they would just clash at times. As she, got older and was looking for independence, there was some of that tension. But my sister really, and I think this is true of all of us, was searching for her identity, this hole in her heart of, hey, how am I going to fill this? How do I have worth and identity? And in a lot of ways, she felt isolated, didn't feel like she had a good friend group, and was looking for that worth and identity. The friend group she found were kids that maybe weren't doing the right things, and ended up introducing her to initially weed. And I think that was probably when she was 12, so early middle school. And for her, that became, okay, this is where I feel known and cared for. And this is kind of that identity, that filling a hole in her heart. And so I started noticing that, experiencing that late elementary school.
I was gonna say, she was 12, you were 9. Yeah, that's little.
Yeah. And so all of it's progressive, right? And so she started smoking weed in middle school, and I think was an addict for about 15 years. So that was progressive, started with weed into heroin and everything in between. And how that affected me, the hardest years of that in some ways were middle school, because I was still pretty dependent at home a lot. There's less ways for you to get out of your house when there's conflict and stuff. But I remember really early on in that late elementary school, middle school, there was just a ton of fighting in my house between my parents and my sister, her not wanting to do what they asked her to do, her rebelling, breaking rules, led to her at I think 3 different times running away in middle school and us not knowing where she was. And it ultimately led my parents to have my sister go to a Christian boarding school for a year and a half. And, partly to keep her safe, try to get her away from the people that she was with that were having her use drugs and participating in that with her. What was the last part of the question? Like how it affected my home?
Yeah. How did it affect your home? Yeah.
I would just say this. That's how it played out, I think, from my experience with my parents. And then part of that for me was my sister got a lot of the attention. So I really felt like I was on the back burner. And it was a necessity. I don't think my parents would do anything wrong there, but my sister just needed so much of their attention. And it made me have to grow up really quick, Val. Oh man, I almost felt like I needed to be the one that fixed it. I comforted, especially my mom when there was a lot of fighting, or, I think my mom cried every day for a year when they sent her to that Christian boarding school. So it's like a middle schooler, like, hey, how do I fix this? What's like, you're having to grow up a little bit and feel like some of that a weight that you maybe wouldn't feel as a middle schooler, feeling like I had to be the one that did the right thing to fix it. And so that put a lot of pressure on me, I think, early on in middle school.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. How did you feel towards your sister? What was your relationship like with your sister at that time?
I think it definitely went in ebbs and flows. I really care about my sister. I really cared about my sister. I was heartbroken for her. And at the same time, I was mad at her in different seasons of like, don't you see what what is happening because of these decisions you're making. I think the feeling that was overarching the most common over those maybe 15 years was, I think, resentment at times. I think some of it pours out of me feeling like I didn't get as much attention, but a lot of it was I would see my sister mess up and my parents give her grace repeatedly of like, all right, in some ways, it almost felt like, hey, you've got lower expectations for her. And so you're always ready to dish out grace. But if I responded and did the same thing, there's no way I would get a second chance.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's truth to it, right?
Mhm.
My parents did have higher expectations for me because of where I was at. But as a middle school, that's really hard to understand. At times, parents need to parent kids differently. And as like a 13-year-old boy, I'm like, I don't understand that at all. That doesn't seem right. And so I think I resented her. That caused at times, I think, frustration with my parents. But I was, in a lot of ways, pretty gracious with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew how hard it was, right? Like I didn't blame them for the situation as much as I was frustrated with my sister for continuing to use and seeing how it impacted my life and my parents and the whole part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. How did it, as all this is going on, you guys are still like going to church. Your parents are trying to follow Jesus. They're trying to figure that out. How again, I know you're a teenager. How did it affect your relationship with God at all? Like, did you feel like he was a part of that equation at all? Or what were kind of your thoughts as far as like, where did you feel like God fit in the mix of everything that was going on?
Yeah. I think my parents did a good job helping put God at the center of it. One of the cool things that I was able to experience in the midst of this was, I really did. I think I prayed for my sister almost every day for 15 years. And that's something that like my parents initiated and we started doing together.
Yeah.
And even though it sucks, some of the goodness of it is I learned really early on that there's stuff that's out of my control. And the only one that can really do stuff in it is God. And so, man, I've got to go to him and lean on him in it. But I think some of what impacted my relationship with God is some of what I was saying before about that resentment. Val, you'll be familiar with this, but there's a passage in the Gospel of Luke called the prodigal son, and Jesus is telling it's a parable, but essentially I feel like I relate really well with that. And if you're unfamiliar, read it. It's in Luke 15. But essentially the story is there's two sons. One of them is like really faithful, obedient to his father, present, does everything that's asked of him. And the second one rejects his dad and says, hey, I don't want anything to do with you. I want your stuff, and runs away. And I really equated, well, my sister's that prodigal son that eventually comes back and everyone's really excited, gets a billion chances. And I felt like, well, I'm the one that has to do it all right. And no one really cares. Right. And so obviously there's a really good ending to that. And how I was feeling was wrong. But I think that's what I wrestled with God of, feels like, and wrestling with it with my parents as well. Everyone else is going to get way more grace than me. And so I think my identity was I have to be the hero. I have to do it all right. I've got to be there to help other people. And part of that included a lot of sin, right? Like, no, I'm so much better than my sister. I don't do anything wrong, which just isn't true, right? Like over time, what God had to do is through the process, make me realize, Sean, like you are just as messed up as your sister is. And break through some of my pride. But it was really hard at first because I had so much resentment built up in that.
Yeah. I was going to say that idea of that resentment, I think that is very real and it's like subtle, because it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense that you would feel like you get all the attention. I'm still a kid too. I need some attention. Now I have to be double good because so that we don't completely break our parents' hearts, like just all of that type of stuff, I think is really heavy. And it's not like immediate. I'm sure there's kind of this like subtle buildup of all of those things, as time goes on.
Yeah. It's probably some of it. Yeah. It's so subtle. I don't think at the time always I knew it was resentment, right? You just, hey, this is all of this stuff I feel like is so sneaky. In the moment, did I realize that I was feeling resentment towards my sister, or that I was really saying in my mind, man, I've got to be the one that always does things right. No, but it played out in my actions a ton.
Yeah. Did other people know what was going on? Did like people at church or friends of your family or your extended family, or was it more of like a family secret for you guys? And did you feel like that was however you guys handled that as a family, do you think that was helpful or hurtful, or How did that play out? I definitely don't know the answer to this question. This is new information for Val. I don't know how they handled it.
So this is something I'm really thankful that my parents did, because I grew up in a town where, I mean, it's a lot about, hey, put those white picket fences up, keep up with the Joneses, pretend like you have it all together, even if your life's on fire.
Yeah, the house is on fire. Right.
And my parents fought against that a ton and I think to our benefit. They were really real and upfront, and some of it, and I think this stems from their relationship with Jesus, but they just were like, hey, like, we know we can't do this on our own. We know that there's things that we can do better as parents, but in a lot of ways, a lot of this is out of our control, and we need God to be in the midst of this. So they were really open with us of, hey, we've got to be prayerful. We've got to ask God to be in the midst of it. But that also meant they were honest with their friends, our family of, hey, we're not trying to hide this. That doesn't help. And so they were also looking for wisdom from people who have maybe had similar experiences. Well, hey, you have a sibling or a husband, a wife that's struggled with addiction. What does it look like to come alongside them well? Where does it mean, like, how do you have good boundaries, and how do you, like, sometimes helping addicts actually makes it worse, and you just don't know all of that. And so it never felt like we were isolated. Never felt like I had a secret that I had to protect my family in.
Yes.
And so the benefits of that is, I always felt like there was adults that were checking up on me. There was people, I said me and my parents were praying for my sister for 15 years. There was tons of people coming alongside us in that. And then some of it's, I think this is just a biblical principle, which is why I think this is helpful. Sin festers in the darkness. Part of how, well, darkness and isolation, right? So if you have a secret, no one knows about it, and you've got no one to talk about. So you're going to feel alone and hopeless at times. You're dealing with this really hard thing and you can't talk about it with anyone. It's just not helpful. And so that was a huge blessing to me that I could talk about it and I didn't have to help try to cover it up or anything like that.
Yeah, that's huge. I had lunch with one of my counselor friends this weekend. She's 82 years old. She's a recovered addict.
Okay.
She's been recovered for 35 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
But she always talks about the family authorized story. What you're allowed to share outside of your house. You have the family authorized truth, and that you will never have true healing until you can be honest with what the story is. And so I love that you bring that up about when things are kept hidden, when they're kept in secret, that's where they grow.
Yeah.
That's where they fester. That's where they can become out of control, and these, not just for the person, but even for the family surrounding them.
Yeah.
I think it can
no one knows. It helps my sister's addiction grow if it's a secret, but no one knows how it's really affecting me. Right. No one could speak into, Sean, your identity as being a good person, and guess what? You're not. And no one could speak that into me unless I was able to be open and honest with what was going on back home. Right. So it all needs to be brought to light.
Yeah, it's so good. So good. Okay, so we got to keep moving. We got to keep moving with the story. So you go to college.
Yeah.
Your sister, I think, is still using at that point, So you go away to college, you start, growing up out of the house, living your life. When do things start changing for your sister? When did her story really start to change and stuff like that?
So when I was in college, I think it's the height of my sister's addiction, right? She's an adult out of my parents' house. Times we don't know where she's at. Times where she's living maybe on the streets. It's probably the height of our fear. My fear as a brother of the next phone call I get is that my sister OD'd, is that her back in jail. But it's just interesting. I think some people need to hit really rock bottom to get free from addiction. Everything else I've tried has messed my life up and failed. I've got no other option but to trust in Jesus. And that's really what happened with my sister. My sister had obviously heard about God and Jesus and his death and resurrection for her. She wanted nothing to do with it growing up. It took her probably, I think, 3 Christmases in a row. She was in jail, several rehab stints. And then in the midst of the last one, it was just, she had had enough.
Yeah.
And she was like, what I'm doing is failing me. And I've got to trust in Jesus for my hope, my identity. And he started to speak into that, give her new life. And from that, I guess that would have probably been right around when I met you around
Yeah, I think it was.
2013.
Yep.
And from right around then, she's been clean since of pursuing Jesus and God working in the midst of it.
That's amazing. What was your response like? Like as soon as she said she was going to start following, like what were those kind of early years of her sobriety and following
Yeah.
Jesus like for you?
Yeah, it's that weird mix of like, I mean, it's a cool part of my story of, my God, I prayed for this for 15 years and you answered it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, how often do we have stuff like that where you faithfully are just, God, I mean, the only way this changes is you and him showing up. So, I mean, a huge testimony in my just experience with God. God was working in the midst of it. But then there's also, when it first happens, you're like, all right, I think I've kind of heard this before. And so how's this all going to play out? Are you really going to stick with this? I know you know the truth about God, but is this real and genuine? Have you given him your life and all that stuff? So there's, I think, especially initially, that hint of skepticism and, all right, some of this, let's see how it actually plays out and what God does.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm like, your sister has such a amazing story that a lot of addicts and a lot of families with addicts don't have.
Right. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people to enter into sobriety for that long is so rare.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's such an amazing story. And I just think testimony to the power of like the true power of Christ that like can heal somebody, like heal someone and bring them out after they really like surrender to Jesus. But a lot of families don't have that story, So, okay. I love your sister's story so much. I think it's so amazing. I think it's just never gets old. It never gets old.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to get back to you because this is a podcast about you,
Sure. Yeah.
But what has God taught you? You kind of like sprinkled some of this stuff in as we've been talking, but just really like pointedly, what are some of the things that you feel like God has taught you about himself through having a sister who was an addict and now is in recovery? What are some things that you feel like God taught you about who he is?
Yeah, no, it's
through
good.
that process.
Yeah, and I love how you pointed out it's not everyone's story too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because sometimes like a transformation like my sister's is rare, right? Like, even from me and my wife to have family on both sides of still in addiction, or like a cousin of mine who passed away from addiction, right? And it's such a raw, real thing. And I think why podcasts like this is important is it probably touches all of our lives in some capacity, even if it's not direct like family you live with. But I think one of the things God taught me is just the reality of miracles can happen, right? Like that God is involved in our lives. That, like I said, of praying for 15 years and knowing like, hey, I've tried. I can't make this better. I've got to be faithful to the opportunities God gives me and do good, but I can't fix my sister's stuff. And so just being able to lean on him and see just over time, God can do amazing things and do more than I ever imagined as like a 15-year-old boy. The other side of that is God's timeline's not my timeline. And so often, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you've been like, God, like, why can't you do this now? Right? Like I had this really great idea, and it would be that I would not be in pain and suffering and like this awful thing, is awful. Why is it not this way? And that's probably a whole nother podcast that you've got to do too.
For sure. For sure.
But one thing that I've learned in that is just God's timeline of, I think God is good. He is faithful, but he's got a different timeline than me. And thank God for that. I mean, there's one of those things of, I would call it a severe mercy, and I'll try not to rant too long on this for you, Val, but
no, go for it. Go for it.
So much of my story and the goodness that God showed me in my life is tied to suffering and tied to hard things. God used my sister's addiction in so many ways for him to reveal himself to me and care for me. And I think C.S. Lewis says this, but it's a term called a severe mercy. So something that's really hard is awful. Like I wouldn't want to experience it, but in the midst of it, God's really merciful to me in it. And so that's one of those big things God showed me, even through my sister's addiction of, man, God does see me. He does care about me, that he's moving, and he used a bunch of jacked up stuff in the midst of that to care for me over time, right? You don't always see that in the moment.
You don't see it in the moment, but you do over time. Yeah. Yeah. What do you feel like God taught you about yourself?
Yeah.
About who you are?
And this is, I think, maybe one of those big things I sprinkled in throughout. I think I responded with resentment and pride of like, man, this is who I am. I'm the hero, the fixer. This is who I have to be. But over time, I think God really revealed to me of like, hey, you have this resentment, judgment towards your sister, and you are just as messed up. Me and my sister are sinful and both messed up. It just looks different. And hers right now is really affecting our family, but mine is affecting my life and who I am as well. And so it helped me have a lot more humility. And that's some of what I was alluding to. It helped me have a relationship with God, because before I was like, I'm the answer to it all, right? I have to have it all together. I'll be perfect. It's just not true, not reality. And so that's some of the mercy God gave me of being able to see myself clearly and see that just in the same way my sister needed God to heal her addiction and get clean, I need Jesus too, because of my sin and my brokenness.
Yeah. And Sean, I'm just thinking about how you started where the story started. You're talking about how your sister was really looking for a place to belong and was really searching for her identity. And the path that her searching for her identity took her down ended up being with these influences, and then with drugs and stuff like that. But we're all, especially I feel like as young people, but don't be deceived, as adults too, we still deal with identity stuff. But I think it really starts when you're a teenager of saying who am I? Who cares about me? What makes me valuable to my family, to the people around me, in my world, who sees me? And I think that a lot of times, your sister went the route of drugs and that path. But, I think it's so easy. I think kind of what you're getting at is some of it is okay, well, Sean gets good grades. Sean's a good kid. Where does he fit into the community? He fits in because he's a good kid. He fits in because he gets good grades. He fits in because he helps his family. Instead of hurt, and there's so much until our identity is really rooted in who we are as being made by God in the image of God, understanding that we are also broken, whether it just might look different. We also have brokenness, but that God tells us who we are. He forgives us. And then we walk in this new identity. It doesn't matter what other path we take until that stuff is centered right, until our identity is centered right. We are not right. We are not right, either with ourselves or before God.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I think some of what we're getting at is this, that God's made all of us to have our lives and our identity wrapped in Him and who He says we are, and anything we put in there. And it could be good stuff that isn't harmful necessarily, on the outward, but anything. So like you said, my identity of being a good person or getting good grades, that still fails me and doesn't give me life in the way that God created me for. And it would leave me just as broken as my sister's addiction would in the long run. And like you said, we form those things like I'm the hero, I'm the fixer when we're teenagers. But I still have to wrestle with that. I still have to surrender that to the Lord and say, hey, Sean, you are not God's gift to the world, right? You've got to hold on a second. And all of us have that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Okay. I know there's all kinds of students who are listening to this podcast. Some who this might be more of an abstract thing. Maybe there is someone in their extended family who they've kind of heard might be an addict, or a friend of theirs is living in a situation like this or whatever. And then we have people that it's really personal for. Maybe they're in their home. They live with an addict, whether it is a parent or a sibling or a grandparent or something like that. For a moment, I want you to just speak to them. What would you say to that kid who's in the house right now? What advice would you give them, first of all, of just living in that situation? And then I also want to give a part two to that. Let me answer part one first, though. Just for a second, speak to and encourage them or give them advice.
I would say, I mean, it's so hard, right? Because some of what you said, it's so general. It being your sibling, in my experience, is so much different than, man, it's your mom or your dad. And I know there adds so many layers to that, guys. When it's people who are supposed to be caring for you are sometimes the ones that are hurting you. And I have a lot of friends who that's been their experience, and a different layer of hard. But if I can speak to anything, I want you to know this: God sees you, God cares about you. There's probably been times where you don't feel like anyone sees you, cares, understands. And I want you to know that he does, that there is a God that does see you, does care about you. And I would just encourage you to talk to Him, to pray, to ask Him to be in the midst of it with you. Ask Him to do miraculous things in the lives of whoever that addict is, because I think he can. But I know some of it is just that the hurt and the pain of, if I can give you anything, run to God, because he does care about you, and he does love you, and he does want good things for you. And I think the second thing maybe I would say there is, I think this especially depends on who that addict is, but don't go through it alone, right? Like if that's your parents, if that's a sibling, that it's really hard. Me and Val hit this a little bit already, but you need to be able to talk about it with people.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if it's your parents and there's bigger stuff going on there, like go to a good, godly adult that loves you and cares about you. Sometimes you need a place that isn't your house, that feels safe, that you can be real about what's going on. So, I mean, if you're connected in a church, talk to your youth pastor, talk to a small group leader, talk to one of your pastors, because they do want to care about you. They care about that stuff that's going on in your life. But I would just say, man, any good godly adult, maybe that's a teacher, but don't go at it alone. Is part of what I would say as well. Try to think if I have anything else off the top of my head. Maybe ask me that next question.
No, that's great. No, honestly, you really did hit on it about like, what would you tell them about whether they know Jesus or not? Like whether they are Christian or whether they're just exploring Christianity, and what would you give them about seeking God in the middle of this?
Yeah. Well, I would say this way. If you have a family member that's an addict for any amount of time, you've probably already experienced it's out of your control.
Yeah.
And that's hard, right?
Yeah.
But it is just a reality of, no matter what you do, in some ways, like, you can't fix it. And so that's where I would encourage you to turn to the Lord, because the reality is, either way, you are out of power in this situation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost you anything to run to God and pray. So really the bet you're taking is, hey, I can pray and talk to God and try to take it seriously, and God's not real, and you waste like 5 minutes. But the bet that Val and I would take all day is, I think God's going to show up, and he's going to meet you in the midst of it, because he does love you and he is real. And so I would just say it's worth it. There is a God that exists, that loves you, that cares about your situation, has not forgotten about you. And even in the midst of the hard, like, he wants to meet you in the midst of it and sit in it with you. And some of what I'd say is, it's probably helpful to remember who our God is. The God we believe in sent his son Jesus to die on our behalf. So God is not a God who is far away. He is not a God who is unaccustomed to suffering.
Yes.
But he can uniquely relate to you, because he has died on the cross. He's been beaten, whipped. He has experienced awful, brutal things. Betrayed, has friendships, broken relationships, the loss of his earthly father who died, like, so much stuff. Yes. And so if our God has experienced that, then first, he cares about you experiencing it too, and he can sit in the midst of it with you. And so just know you have a God that can relate and does care, and all you have to do is turn to him, and all you got to do to talk to him. And so I would just, man, that is so much of my story of, man, I'm going to get emotional. So much of my story of nights crying, frustrated with my sister and my parents, like, what's going on, crying out to God, and him showing up and meeting me in the midst of it. And so that's you. I hope you experience that as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Like I said, like Sean and I have known each other for a long time. And Sean, I always think of you just as my friend, as someone who has so much faith, like as somebody who like knows what the right thing to do is, and just like will follow Jesus, and knows, is really confident, like more than the rest of us, like is really confident that God is going to show up and be who he promises to be. And even now, like, again, even just hearing you tell the story, I'm just realizing like how much of that is really like, you have seen that in your life. Yeah. Like, you have seen the faithfulness of God. And so even when I met you when you were young, when you were 23 years old or something like that, like, you already had this like deep well of faith, because like you saw God show up in your family so many times and be who he promised to be. And so I just love that that's not a theological truth or something that you talk about in church or something. Yeah. I know that that's very real to you, and I see that lived out in the rest of your life. Again, talking about that severe mercy, what a gift to have that kind of like confidence in God that was only like came out of a really, really hard time in your family.
So it's a weird thing where you're like, God, man, I'm so thankful I've seen you show up and do this. And yet it only happens in the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sean, we don't always do this on this podcast, but I just feel like we should today. Could you just pray briefly for, like for a kid in a situation like you as a high school kid? Could you just pray for them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we'll be done. So guys, thanks so much for listening. We love having you guys following along with this podcast. If it brought up questions for you, please send them in. You can find a link to add your questions. If you have questions specifically about something Sean said, send them in. If you've got questions just in general, send them in. Sean, is there any way for a student to get a hold of you? Are you on social media?
Not really.
Really?
Sorry, guys. It's not my life right now, but you can email me.
Okay. We'll put
My
your email.
email address. But do you want me to say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Do you know
yeah.
what? We'll drop it in the show notes. That's what everyone wants anyway. They just want to
It's
click
in the
on it.
show notes.
We'll
It's
just drop
simple.
it. We'll drop it below there. So if you want to get a hold of Sean, go
Yeah.
ahead. Send him an
Email me.
email.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And if you have other questions, send them into us also. So Sean, just take us out of this episode. Would you just pray for some students?
All right, let's pray. God, we just come before you and we thank you that you are a God that does care about us. Even just what me and Val were just talking about, that you've experienced suffering, you've experienced every earthly pain that we have, and yet you are faithful and you care about us and you're not far off. And so, God, I pray that you'd use this podcast, whoever's listening, and maybe they're just in a hard home situation, whether it's their parents, siblings, and they are just heartbroken over their addiction and the way that it's impacting them and their lives, Lord. Lord, what I pray is right now that they would experience you, that they would maybe it's them calling out to you for the first time, and I pray that they would feel your presence. I pray that they feel known by you, that they know that you care about them and that you're there with them. And I pray that you would use this situation for them to experience you and grow in their faith. I pray that you would put good, godly adults in their lives to fill the gaps where maybe siblings or parents aren't present, and that they'd care for them and point them to you. And I pray for healing. God, I pray for whoever the addict is in their lives, Lord, that you would supernaturally step in. God, we pray that you would help that person to get clean, not just so that they aren't drinking every day or aren't using any drugs, but that their life would be transformed because they've experienced you. That whatever hole's going on in their heart and life that we all have, that would be filled by the only thing that can really satisfy, and that's you. And so I pray that you would meet them in the midst of that, and you would create healing and new life for their family, but also for the student that's watching this right now. We pray all this in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks so much, Sean.
Yeah.